It may look bleak now, England, but don't worry. Arsenal will be back in the Champions League next season to save your reputation. This is the ArsenalVision Post-Match Podcast. My name is Elliot Smith. You can block me on Twitter, Yankee Gunner. That's right. No English sides prevailed in the Champions League this week, but that's something that I'm sure will be corrected next season as the rightful Champions League placeholders. Arsenal will be there to represent, to show out. It's so weird. Once upon a time, we felt so entitled to be in the competition. And now it feels so foreign. I believe it's been 6 years, is it, that we've not been in it? And, you know, and through this whole title challenge, our focus has been the title, and it should stay the title, and rightfully so. But watching the Champions League this week, I did get just a little twinkle, just a little tingle of excitement for being back in it. And I'm curious to hear what the guys have to say about that. We're going to talk a little bit today about the treatment Saka gets from the refs, because everybody unanimously gives us feedback that they love referee conversations, so that'll be fun. Talk a little bit about Smith Rowe, Vieira, the Europa League coming up. How good are City actually? Maybe how bad are Liverpool actually? All things that we can cover in a relatively quiet week. And when you win, and you win the way we did, and the mood is high, and there's no midweek football for us, and there's midweek football for others, it tends to be a fairly quiet week around Arsenal, and we will take it. And here to take it with me, I guess is one way you could put that, is Clive. You can find him on Twitter at ClivePAFC. Hello, Clive.
Hello.
And Tim, you can find him on Twitter at Stillmanator. Hello, Tim.
Hello there.
It's just second nature now. Okay, so I guess first things first, let's just pop through the Champions League stuff quickly, Tim. Saw two interesting and contrasting performances from Liverpool and City. City, their sort of usual dominant self in the first half, and in the second half, a little bit of that glass jaw and a little bit of the frailty emerged. And the thing I thought was interesting is Pep didn't make a single sub. Now, I don't know if his idea there... What was that?
He often doesn't.
Yeah. Well, but I was wondering if the idea there was, I've got my team I'm going to use midweek, and the players I'm going to use in the league are going to be completely fresh and untouched midweek. Like if he's really thinking about this as two groups, I can't see that, because I can't imagine a scenario where Haaland doesn't play at the weekend and, some of those players don't play. But then again, maybe he won't. I'm curious your take on where we're at with Manchester City, because there is this belief that they are just this colossus that will eventually go on a run, win all their games, finish on 92, 94 points, and that's what we have to do. And yet, as I watch them with my eyes, I don't see that team yet. Maybe it's coming, but I don't see it.
Yeah, exactly the same. And you're right. Like, obviously, we caveat all of this heavily, because as much as we try not to be, every football fan has a little bit of superstition in them. Even like people like me, who make like someone like Richard Dawkins look, so something of a fantasist. But it's so obviously we caveat this, but like, no, they do not. And there's a lot about this title race that is being judged on priors, and obviously, like, that's understandable. And again, we're all doing that to an extent, and that is understandable, because that is the evidence. The past is the best evidence we have to go on. But Arsenal are jumping from finishing fifth to finishing first or second. Basically, that's a big jump. That tells you Arsenal are very different this season, even to last season. And most of us enjoyed most of last season and thought we were good and were progressing. So that's kind of, like, we're a different proposition, but there's still this kind of, Arsenal are very frail, blah, 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 like all the stuff that we hear. And it's exactly the same with City, because City do pretty consistently do that thing where they win 10, 11 games in a row or whatever. They don't do it every season, though. People are forgetting the season they lost the title to Liverpool. They were miles back. They were absolutely miles back. Like, it was done before COVID. Like, I think they were about 12 or 13 points behind or something at that point. Like, they were miles and miles behind. So they do have an off season by their standards in them. But I get why people assume they're just going to win kind of 10 games in a row. And that's why City winning one game is always judged as the beginning of that run. So, like, when they beat Villa, for example, just before they beat us. Like we said it, they lost to Tottenham 1 week before, but that was and deserved to lose and weren't very good. And that was completely swept away and forgotten about. And it's like, right, they've beaten Villa now, so that's the next 9 games done. And like nothing that we see this season tells us that's going to be the case. It might very well be the case. I wouldn't be massively surprised if it was, but that is not the evidence of this season. And City are a different team as well. We forget their squad has changed a lot, not just because of the Haaland thing, which is kind of given to them and taken away from them. There's an adjustment there, but guys who used to play all the time, like Joao Cancelo's not there anymore, Raheem Sterling's not there anymore, Gabriel Jesus is not there anymore because he's with us, ditto Alex Zinchenko. So they've lost some pillars of the teams that did that went on those big long runs.
Yeah.
And I do think there's something about that Grealish, Mahrez, Haaland front three that isn't optimal. I don't know what's going on with Phil Foden, but I thought the partnership Phil Foden had with Haaland earlier in the season looked really dangerous. To me, Foden, I feel like Foden's miscast as a bit of a creator sometimes, which I think he can be because he's technically very gifted, but I think he's much more of a Sterling type style second striker. Like, I think if you play Foden in every game, he'd hit 15, 20 goals. I see him as a very good secondary goal scorer who could play off Haaland. I don't know what's going on there, but I'm fine with it because I don't think they look better with Grealish and Mahrez. I think they look a little bit more predictable just because both of those players are relatively similar and they both come inside, and I think it creates a lot of centrality and maybe a little bit of predictability sometimes. So yeah, absolutely this title race more than any other is being judged on priors. And yeah, I think it's a little bit OTT, a bit like us drawing with Brentford, and that's it. All of a sudden, it's all like as it stands, we're 2 points clear with a game in hand.
Yeah,
that's a very commanding position by the standards of a title race. And we all know we haven't been there for years and years and years, so you understand why that comes with caveats. But even when we lost to Man City, we were level on points with a game in hand. We still had the advantage.
yeah.
But it's talked about we've gone 5 points behind now and it's gone. Just not the case at all.
And I do get it, right? Reputationally, we are a team that was eighth, fifth, and they are a team that was first, second, or whatever it was, and near 100 points in multiple seasons. And so the bias is understandable, right? But the thing about how it's viewed, I mean, and people will say, well, they beat us. Sure, but I think the reason we had so much disappointment about how that game played out is even watching them on the grass against us, we just kind of let them off the hook, right? Because we made errors by our box, we didn't execute by their box, and that's all it took. We all know the stats, lowest this, lowest that, fewest this, fewest that. Clive, to be clear, first of all, the data still shows them as a very good team, and I think they are a very good team. And my eyes still say they're a very good team. I mean, we can sometimes over-index results because what did they have? 24 shots to 3 against Forest. Forest had 1 shot on target and get a 1-1. And, I saw the way they dominated the ball against Red Bull Leipzig the other day in the first half, but in the second half, you saw a little bit of a different pattern of play. It's not that I think they're not good. It's that I'm starting to think the fear that this is a team that will just do what they did to Liverpool that season, where they pick up every available point the rest of the way and finish in the mid-90s points, may not be the team we're actually up against. Some players are getting older. Maybe there's a little discontentment in the camp. I'm curious how you diagnose the situation at City right now. Are they the Colossus and we have to win all the games? Where's your current barometer of what we need to do to keep them in our rearview mirror?
Yeah, I said this a few weeks back that I don't think they're the force that they were. And the reason being, for me, the thing that used to scare me about City was the penetration from the outsides. And they've lost Jesus, they've lost Sane, they've lost Sterling. Those people that cut through you, they're not there. And they've got, when they go out wide now, they go out wide to standstill players that don't really run off the ball in behind. They wait to feet. If you get to feet, you can slow them down. I do think obviously they've got ability, they've got a centre forward. And this sort of team reminds me of a Liverpool team actually in the past with Gerrard and Torres up front. It's just KDB and Haaland. We can flip that around. And in that Liverpool team, they had players like Dirk Kuyt on the outside, and it was a very good side, strong side, but they really had one world-class link. And they didn't win the league. Gerrard played in the 10 behind Torres. They were a superb partnership, but they didn't have quite enough variations of attack. Now, if you know your enemy, right? So I've been watching City closely now for a while, watching their games closely. And I think they're slow. I think they're looking at their feet. They don't play the ball when they should do. They turn away from passes. They want to control the games. Fine. That game against RB Leipzig, it faced them into the Forest game without all the chances. They had them, and you heard my phrase, they're playing 2-0 football at 1-0. They're playing 2-0 football and it's 1-0, and they get all the other team needs is 15 minutes, and it's an equaliser, and they're in a bit of trouble. So he's doing his thing regarding the defensive shape, which I quite like, actually, how he uses the defenders. I felt last night they used Walker high and wide, and he hasn't got enough on-the-ball ingenuity to really make that position work. I bet they wish they had a young kid called Bukayo Saka, because he could sort that position out high and wide and do the defending as well, rather than putting a centre-back, right-back high and wide who didn't have the ability on the ball to really move the ball well. So, and I don't think their squad is as strong. No one can tell me that Bernardo Silva in that inverted left-back role is better than Zinchenko. No chance. He's better than him and Lewis. I think he's the biggest miss for them. They didn't get Cucurella, which would have been the signing for them, because Pep would have used him way better than Chelsea are using Cucurella. He would have been an attacking force and a very difficult one to stop. But
I don't think they planned for Cancelo to just suddenly be bad and then leave.
Exactly.
Changed them dramatically.
It has, much like the Aubameyang situation with us last season. That wasn't in our plan, right? We expect to have him as leading our front line. It wasn't in our plan. They gave Cancelo the number 7 shirt and said, "There you go, son. You've got free range of the midfield and just be a Zinchenko basically for us." And he's obviously got the strop, and he's gone off to Bayern Munich, where he's playing absolutely fantastically well.
So, what do you know? Yeah.
So they've got problems. As I said at the start of the season, the league is in transition. It has surprised me, Liverpool, where they are, but the league is in transition, and big pillars, as Tim said, have to be assimilated into the teams of these other teams. And as I said before, the team that really concerned me at the start of the year was not any of these. It was Spurs. I thought they'd be more stable. I thought the manager would have a bit more time with them. He did some work with them on their fitness. I thought, much like us, a stable group, I thought they could be a problem. But they're Spurs, right? So they've done their thing. So that was where my eyes were. It wasn't on this group. I thought we'd get a lot closer to them. It was Spurs was my worry for the top 4.
Can I just pick up on something there as well, which I think Clive said, which is interesting about teams who have one very, very common outpost for goals. Generally, if you look, those teams don't win leagues very often. So you look at Arsenal, right? In 1991, when we were champions, we bought Ian Wright,
very similar
legend,
team.
Brilliant player, didn't win the league until he got injured. And then, at United, they had Ruud van Nistelrooy for 6 seasons, I think. They won the league once. They sold him. They went to a rotating front 3 of Rooney, Ronaldo, Tevez, won the league 3 years in a row and won the Champions League. So, generally speaking, I think teams that have that are based around that single threat, not always, it does happen, but I think they struggle to win the league usually.
I wonder if that if that pertains more to single threat in the center as opposed out wide, because I can think of, Mohamed Salah. Well, I guess he wasn't really a single threat, Clive.
Yeah, it's not the City Vision podcast, but I have to say last night, I think Pep recognised that KDB wasn't there. So what he tried to do was put Mahrez into that narrow position and create that link to the centre forward. So he knows where his bread's buttered. His bread is buttered on the Haaland sandwich. So we all sit here and we worry about Jesus being injured, and we worry about Partey being injured. But could you imagine City if Haaland gets injured? There are people that'll tell you they'd be better. But, no, I don't think so.
They have Alvarez. You don't think so?
No chance. No way. They would not be better. They haven't got the variation. Foden's not where he is. They haven't got Sterling to play false 9. He's sulking about something. right? They haven't got the threats. They seriously haven't got the threats. You tell me how you configure that team if Haaland's not there. Alvarez comes in, runs about a bit. No problem. Everyone can deal with that. They haven't got the threats. They haven't got the bi-directional movement. They haven't got the penetration. They're in transition, and we've got to take them. This is the time to do it.
Yeah. The scary thing is they're in transition, and like, don't get it twisted. They're going to finish on 86 points or higher, right? Maybe they're not going to do 96, but it's going to be 86, 87, 88. It's going to be right in there. And that shows you how hard it is what we're trying to do, right? Because City are vulnerable, in air quotes, to the extent that if you can get 90 points, you can win a league. Now, fair enough. You kind of probably need 90 points to win a league. Like, that's not an outrageous thing to have to do. That's just where we're at right now. I think we can shift away from City here, but I thought that was interesting conversation only because the question of, yeah, Tim, we won the league unbeaten on 90 points, he has typed in. So, like, it shows you where we're at now, right? Just in terms of what it takes and what we expect to be a league winner. But I think it is an interesting conversation because there's this sense that we're being stalked by one of the great sides of all time, and that any slip up in any way means the title challenge is over. And us as fans can think that. You can think whatever you want, but maybe it would help the players to feel like they're being stalked by a slightly more vulnerable team so that you don't feel that immense pressure that any single slip up. I mean, look, don't get me wrong. Don't drop any points, guys. Okay. But if you feel that you can't even drop 2 points anywhere, any point in the season, the task can almost feel overwhelming, almost like it's an impossible task. And so we still have hard games. We have to go to the Etihad. And, there's this attitude kind of like, well, you can't lose there. The title's over. We'll see. But I think maybe the margin for error is going to look a little different as we get towards the tail end of the season. I think we're going to drop points. I think City's going to drop points. I think Manchester United, that's a team that people think, like, frankly, is in the title race. And maybe they are, maybe they're not. We'll have to see how that plays out. Okay, well, let's shift gears a little bit here. Clive, one of the conversations that's being had, I think, in Arsenal circles a lot right now is the question of how you protect Bukayo Saka, because he does just get kicked a lot. Paul made a point on a previous pod that I thought was a really interesting one, and then I saw a video going around. I think it was a Tifo video maybe, but that I thought was interesting about how do you want the fouls to be called? In other words, you see a lot of wingers, they're out on the touchline, they're in midfield, they get a kick, they go down. What do you get? You get a free kick at the touchline in midfield. Saka wants to ride challenges. He wants to beat a man. He wants to carry the ball into the attacking third into more dangerous positions. And this video showed the same thing, how he spins off his man and by staying on his feet, advances the ball to more threatening, dangerous positions than if he were to go down and get those calls. I think this is where the playing advantage can also help, because you don't have to give the call if he stays on his feet, but maybe you can come back and penalize it with a card or however you want to do it. But I'm curious how you see Saka's game and the strength in his game and his willingness to stay on his feet and beat players and the way he's refereed all coming together to create any sense of worry you might have about him, or, if you think referees need to adjust to the way he plays. How do you think about the numbers there? Because statistically, Saka draws a very average number of fouls in the league. He actually has more cards than people have for fouling against him, I believe, is the stat or something like that. So it doesn't feel right. It certainly can't be right. Do you think something has to change? And is it with the players, is it with the referee? How do you look at that?
Yeah, Arsenal are a flow-based team, as we all know. So when the ball goes into wide areas, we all get excited because we got our two 21-year-olds that can normally beat two men. So we empty the middle out, don't we? We empty the middle, create a big hole, leave one man in there, and we try to create combinations in wide areas. So we want the guys to have the ability to get out of that phone box and keep the ball, and then we're off and running onto an exposed back four because we've emptied the middle out. So we all know how we play. So when Saka and Martinelli get smashed, particularly Saka, we're frustrated because we know the ball's going to Odegaard, and when it goes to his feet on the back four, our lives are much happier, right? So, so the point about keeping him going, that's the flow point. And I do think what's not really clear and what doesn't get tracked in metrics is the amount of times Saka gets half fouled but retains the ball and flicks it off, and we've still got the ball, but he's on the floor holding his legs. And there's no foul for it because advantage is played. And so I do feel there's double-edged to this. I do think the referees are trying to play advantage around him. But this is my big thing on this one. People know he's our best player. Goals and assists, he's the man. So if you can get around him, you can stop him, you can kick him, hurt him, because let's not mess about, this isn't kindergarten stuff, hurt him, you've got a better chance of stopping Arsenal. That'd be the player I would go for. So what's changed in the game? So the referees are now doing this edict now where physicality, they want to let the physicality go, let the game go, make a product, all the rest of it. They're having that same edict at the same time that 5 substitutes have been introduced. So what can you do? Back to my basketball analogy. You can throw bodies at him. You can throw a fullback in at Saka. You can be really aggressive. You don't mind if he gets booked, because at half time, you can take him off and throw another fullback at him. So it's beyond rotational fouling, Elliot. You see what I mean? You can go really hard. Aston Villa, Moreno and Luca Digne on the weekend, 2 left backs, bang, to manage that one player. And other teams have done it as well, right? Man City did it. They had Bernardo there. They soon moved him out of the way and got Ake out there, man to man in the second half. So people are throwing bodies at him. So the 2 edicts, the change in the game, which I'm a big fan of, 5 substitutes, is not aligned to the referee edict of allowing physicality. So referees need to change their edict and say, by the way, I'm going to book you early. And I'm not ruining the game because you've got 5 substitutes you can use. Back in the day, was you get a free one. Remember that, Tim? You get a free 1 or 2 or 3 nowadays. And but you don't want to ruin the game because you don't want to send anybody off. No. You're putting the emphasis on the coach to say, I know what you're trying to do here. Now you've got to make a change that might weaken you. So the referees need to catch up to the evolution tactically in the game, particularly with the 5 substitutes. And then they're just so dumb. How could you do that? How could you have an edict to let physicality go when there are more people to be physical? You can literally have 15 players on the pitch and change them around. So you have to be sharper on the cards to allow the flow of the game going. 2 things that bother me, I've got to say, flow and time management. They are the keys to the product. And don't let me start it on time management. I've got stuff on that. I'll hold that for now, shall we say.
Yeah. Well, I think the game where it really annoyed me was the City game because Bernardo Silva cannot live with Bukayo Saka. And he was just cynically fouling him time and time again. And he didn't get the card until very, very late on. And I think had he gotten it earlier, we might have had a little more ability to expose them because that was an area where they were... Candidly, Pep had gotten it wrong, right? And we were exploiting it, but they were using fouling and cynical fouling to cover the gap. And if you don't penalize that, then essentially you're not allowing Arsenal to exploit the tactical advantage that they have. And that levels a playing field in a game where we had an advantage. You want to play to your advantage. And Silva just said, well, I'm just going to foul Saka and I'm not going to get cards. And so that game really annoyed me. I think, Tim, it's tough. You also can't be too precious. If you're really good at dribbling guys, if you're really strong, if you're really good at staying up, you're going to have some steel ankles. You're going to have to take some kicks. Like Paul was making this point on the other pod. You ask Liverpool fans what happens to Mohamed Salah and has happened to Mohamed Salah over the years. Like he gets kicked a lot. I mean, Lionel Messi is a great example. There's whole videos just of horror tackles on Lionel Messi. But Messi doesn't want to go down and get a foul because he knows he can take your soul, beat you off the dribble, get in the box and score 50 goals a season. So I want to be careful not to be too precious. And you want it not to get in the heads of players. And I think Mikel is careful how he speaks about it because he doesn't want Saka to have the woe is me victim mentality. He wants him to have the killer mentality of go ahead, try to kick my ankles. You're going to be looking at the back of him when I'm running away from you. So how do you balance that? Because I think something is off about the way this player is refereed. Clearly just on the data, the stats of how many fouls he suffers. Like if you look at cards given per foul suffered versus the cards he gets per foul given, or foul he commits, it's not right. It can't be right. But you don't want to take the player's sort of killer mentality away by giving him that victim complex. So how do you think about this? And I am going to say it for you. I think you've just written about this.
Yes, I have indeed. So like with Arteta, basically the way I divide the responsibility, I think from Arteta's point of view, he's right. from a coach's point of view to not want to it. And again, I'm going to be repeating some stuff I've written in the column this week. Do you remember what he said about Saka playing in the Europa League? And he said, nope, best players in the world turn up every 3 days. And because I think it was before the Bodo Glimt game. And he said, if I put in his head, oh, I don't play this week because it's AstroTurf or whatever. So I don't want that in his head. And what's really interesting, I reread that whole quote, and clearly who he's referencing in the quote is Messi and Ronaldo. He talks about 70 games, 50 goals a season. That's the level he wants to push Saka to, right? Those are the players he's saying, like, they play 70 games a season, they score 50 goals a season, and it's not because they don't want to play the odd game here and there. He says, that's what I want from Saka and what I want from a lot of these young players. So I think this is very similar to that in the respect that, you know, keep going, keep going, keep going, keep going. We don't want you to feel, persecuted or like a victim. And the example I used in the column is if you compare Messi and, as much as I hate to say it, Ronaldo, like I'd say earlier in their career, they were kicked a lot. I don't think it really happens anymore. And I think a big part of that is because both of them refuse to be seen as victims or to behave like victims, even if they had the right to do that at times. They both had this, no, I'm getting back up and I'm coming at you again kind of mentality. And I think after a while, it discourages people from kicking you anyway. Flip that to the player of this generation who, pre-Mbappe and Haaland anyway, who's been closest to them, Neymar, very different. Very different, right? Very different. He, again, as much as at times he has had a right to do that, he has behaved much more like a victim. He's been much more like, histrionics. He's been much more in referees' ears and stuff like that, retaliating, showing like a weakness to it. And what's happening to him? He's out with another ankle injury like he is every February because the rough stuff happens to him more. And I think a lot of that is like, look, he irks people, rightly or wrongly, but also opponents know, they're like, his ankles are quite weak, and it's probably, I'm speculating, because he doesn't really look after himself as well as he should for the age he currently is, but also I can probably get him booked and sent off because he's going to get up and he's going to retaliate, he's going to react. And he's still getting his ankles chopped, and he's got glass ankles now, whereas Ronaldo and Messi, and look, you also have to acknowledge that Ronaldo and Messi had a lot of luck in their career as well, not to pick up, like, they were like an awkward angle on a tackle away from like suffering a bad injury or whatever. But largely, I think that they've both just been ruthless and teams have stopped doing it. Whereas with someone like Neymar, it's much more, this guy doesn't like this. We know he doesn't like it. And, I look a little bit as well, maybe at Zaha as well. Zaha, a very similar player to Saka. I would say similarly kind of treated by referees, and I'd hope internally that under new leadership, PGMOL are more willing, in the spirit of openness and not defensiveness, to maybe look at some of the reasons why this might be, to be open to stress testing some of that, because look, none of us, certainly not me, can sit here and like throw the racism grenade at referee. I don't have enough experience. It's too important a subject for me to just do that. But like, I hope PGMOL are more open to that, at least internally. But I really think there is something in really getting that kind of ruthless mentality. I think privately Arteta probably feels a bit like we do. But yeah, sorry, I look at Zaha, and again, as much as he probably has the right to do it, I think he gives the impression that it really gets under his skin, and then it kind of, at the risk of victim blaming, does kind of become self-perpetuating, rightly or wrongly, but I think it kind of does.
Yeah, I mean, I think point blank, the racism question is an open one, and it would be wrong to ignore it, especially given that you have an all-white refereeing crew in the Premier League. I think there's a right way and a wrong way to assert it. The wrong way to assert it is to just say it's definitely racism. These white referees are racist, because while they may be, I just don't see that as the appropriate way to assert it. I think that what you can say instead is, first of all, there may be racism operating here. I think it's certainly fair to raise the question. And by the way, racism doesn't have to be overt racism. There's something called implicit bias, right? Implicit bias is something that even someone who believes they're not racist can suffer from. Just a sort of prejudice in the way you walk through the world that is operating at a level that's below your conscious level. So implicit bias can be at play. Education
We
can
talked
help.
about Wolves' red card the other week, right? Loads of players surround a referee who gets the second yellow and the red card. Like, again, in isolation, I can't say that that's definitely because the referee is either consciously or unconsciously. But do you know what I mean? Like, again, internally, I hope PGMOL is smart enough and open enough to say, okay, let's have the conversation among ourselves. Let's stress test some of this stuff and let's be open about this, which any organization and individual should do that anyway, but particularly ones that like their whole bread and butter is decision making. They should commit themselves to that scrutiny privately or publicly.
Right. You can take it. You don't have to overtly assert it, but you should still be taking it seriously and inquiring about it. It'd be silly to leave you out of this, Clive, obviously. So I think I'm curious on your perspective, because I feel that when you have people playing a sport refereed by people who, are not from their backgrounds or exclusively not from their backgrounds, and, there's that disconnect, you not only have a question of potential implicit bias or overt racism, you also have a question of the players respecting the referee's back, right? The players feeling you don't get me, or you're out to get me, I should say. And so I think just the dynamic of not having a more diverse group of referees can lead to concerns, both on the parts of fans and on the part of players, that I'm, a player thinking I'm not being refereed fairly. And we certainly don't want that to happen as well. So what's your take on the degree to which some of this may be related to a deeper layer of bias beyond just the individual player, the individual referee?
Yeah. Oh, it's a great topic, right? And brave of you to bring it up, guys. That's why I love you. That's why I love both of you. I think seriously though, referees. We've spoken about diversity of referees, so can we just tick that one off? The game needs to have a look at that. And diversity is not just where you live; it's your diversity of thinking. And this is the real issue. I don't even want to think about the racism issue because I thought about it for many years. I'm a big fan of Patrick Vieira, and don't tell me all those cards were because he was late in the challenge, right? So, and it was very relevant to me then. And I watched Arsenal a lot more home and away then than I do now, particularly away, where you can really see it in different parts of the country, right? The bigger issue for the game for me is profiling of players. And that's not just on a racial basis, but just on what we think a certain player is. So if I say the word Scott McTominay to you, and you look at what he does on the pitch, but he's profiled as a hard-working trier that gets to the tackle as quickly as he could. Nice guy. He can chop you at your knees viciously and very at pace with force, and he has to do a lot to get into that book. Right? And then you look at someone like, I'm just going to pick Big Gabby for the Gabriel Magalhaes, for example. He makes one tackle, arrives there late, he's in the book. 3 minutes or 5 minutes after a supposedly dissent yellow card. And that's what I mean by the profiling of players. That means it's not just on a race basis, it's based on what the referees think a player is. That comes back to diversity of thinking again. If everyone thinks that Granit Xhaka's a Fruit Loop, then every time he makes a tackle, he's going to get dealt with like a Fruit Loop. Do you see what I mean? That's not always fair on him. But that's profiling. That profiling comes from media, how they profile a player to them, and also the way, if you're profiling to the same set of people that think about football and footballers in the same way, you're not getting a diversity of thinking and response to all the inputs that we all receive every single day by various mediums that we all choose to link into in our social media lives, or how we take information about the sport we love on board. It's going to affect your thinking. So you need that diversity of thinking. I don't always agree with someone who's a different background to me on a particular subject, but it's an input to me to have a broader view about the same situation, problem, etc. And you made a great point the other week, Elliot, about the stuff we did around the stadium. Me and Tim was in that room designing the stadium banners around the ground. And Tim, it was a diverse group, wasn't it, mate? It's a diverse group. We were nodding on occasions. We were thinking, what do they talk about on occasions? But you know what? You pull it all together and we have something now that the majority of people are very, very happy with. If it was down to me, you'd have red and white words, mate. I'd have made it simple. I wouldn't have come up with all of the banners that we came up with in the end. And it was all our thinking. And we have to have that thought process around the people that govern the game. The game is not about Scott McTominay's anymore. It's a global game, and we have a number of people from different backgrounds coming into our game that need to be refereed in a different way. And it's the biggest, one of two or three gaps. But for me, it's the area of football that has not evolved with the rest of the game, and it's massively, massively important, and takes up too much oxygen from all of us and thought process. And it's antiquated. It really is. It needs to change. I would love to be part of that discussion. It said, ever ask a fan, but I would love to be part of it. The thinking is not there. You can't have the same people defining a new way of doing things because they're not capable because of their backgrounds, etc.
And
go ahead.
I'd just like to add to that as well. I know Michael Cox always writes really, really well about this, about how football's popularity, a lot of its popularity has snowballed because of changes that have been made to the game, like innovative, like the back pass rule. Like at some point, like I remember that coming in, and I don't remember there being a massive clamour for it, but at some point, someone smart looked at the game and said, like 15 minutes of these games are being taken up with like Alan Hansen passing the ball to Bruce Grobbelaar, him picking it up, bouncing it 3 times. And we're actually in a similar stage, I think, with like time wasting in other ways. And they went, let's get rid of that. Let's just have the ball in play more often. And the back pass rule was a brilliant innovation. Same with like taking out the tackle from behind ahead of the USA World Cup in 94. They were like, do you know what? We got loads of skillful players now. That was another big kind of watermark in terms of overseas talent coming into the Premier League. And someone smart said, I don't want someone chopping down Juninho from behind when he's on a dribble, or Georgie Kincladze. I don't want him taken out of the kneecap. So we're taking out the tackle from behind. And like Michael always writes about how like this is how football has maintained its popularity over the years. And he compares it unfavourably to rugby. And he's like, rugby is a game that hasn't changed in like 50, 60 years. And like very few people watch it anymore because it hasn't made, obviously doesn't have to make identical, but like it hasn't made those little things where they've gone, the game's changing, we need to change with it. And I agree with Clive. I think football is in a similar area now, and it needs those smart people to say, I don't think I want to watch a goalkeeper line up a goal kick for a minute and a half anymore, for example.
Yeah. I think that's really well said. And some aspects of this conversation are this conversation are hard. And I think people want to understandably shy away from hard conversations. But I think instead they can be exciting conversations. If you frame them correctly, you can say, wow, we have a chance to really improve things by being open and honest and exploring where some of the shortcomings are, and through that exploration, achieving a new level where everybody feels better about what we're doing, where the game is better, the league is better, the players feel better, the fans feel more connected to it. So, my hope is that we can do that. And it's weird. I did not expect this conversation to necessarily go this way related to how Bukayo Saka rides challenges. The funny thing is we could have a whole other conversation just about tactically what he does when he's challenged and how doing that creates advantages for Arsenal. There's a lot of interesting aspects to this. But as usual, you guys have brought it to an interesting place, and I appreciate you for doing that. So let's do this. I want to talk, look, I think one of the biggest sea changes in our season could be coming up because the reinforcements are coming. Because Smith Rowe's back on the bench, Reece Nelson is back, Vieira has really become a part of the team, Gabriel Jesus is just about to come back. Here come the reinforcements, right? And that's going to change this season yet again and be another step in a direction, hopefully, towards a title for Arsenal. And so I want to touch on that. Maybe we'll even have time to touch on how we'll balance that against a Europa League campaign. But one of the things that we should also balance against is our body chemistry. As segues go, I think it's okay. And we're talking about Athletic Greens AG1. AG1 is 75 high-quality vitamins, minerals, whole food source superfoods, adaptogens, probiotics. It's everything you need for vitality, anti-aging, sleep, gut health, energy. I think I said that already. Look, I take it and I like it. And I took it before I ever knew about it through this podcast because I have a friend who's a doctor who was like, oh, I take that. You should try it because I was having gut health issues. What I would say to you is that if you take your health seriously, you're probably taking some kind of supplement or a combination of supplements. And if you're taking a bunch of gummy vitamins and stuff, that's where I was at, was doing nothing for me. You could give this a try. I would suggest it. Look, it's keto, paleo, vegan, dairy-free, friendly for all of those lifestyles, low in sugar, costs about the same as a fancy cup of coffee a day. You just put a scoop in water and you drink it down. And you get all the health benefits. So if a comprehensive solution is what you need from your supplement routine, then Athletic Greens is giving you a free 1-year supply of vitamin D and 5 free travel packs with your first purchase. Go to athleticgreens.com/vision. That's athleticgreens.com/vision. Okay, do that for your body. Do this for your mind. This podcast is sponsored by BetterHelp. BetterHelp isn't just online therapy, it's therapy. And I think therapy is something that we have totally messed up in society in terms of the way we think about it, because we think about going to the gym as just natural, normal part of being healthy, and going to the doctor, natural, normal part of being healthy, and eating right, natural, normal part of being healthy. But taking care of our mind, our entire being psychologically, you only do that when you're in crisis. Nonsense. You do it all the time to be a more productive, healthy person. If you have a partner, if you have a husband, a wife, a friend, a brother, a sister, a cousin, someone who you can talk to, that's great. You should have those people in your life. But those people aren't professionals, and they're not there to work you through your problems. And so, and your challenges, and just finding a way to be more effective in life through emphasizing your strengths and working on the challenges that you have as an individual. I've done it. It works. It makes a huge difference. BetterHelp can connect you with a specialist that may not be available in your local area. You don't have to worry about finding the time to get out to an office and come back. It's online. It can be anonymous if you want to go camera off. It's flexible. It's affordable. If you want to live a more empowered life, therapy can get you there. Visit betterhelp.com/vision today to get 10% off your first month. 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/vision. We're almost there, everybody. Just one more thing, and that's if you want to watch Match of the Day and you're not in England, there's one way you can do it with a VPN. If you're in England and you want to watch maybe some of the football coverage that's available in other places, not available in yours, again, a VPN can help. There's lots of times you want to use a VPN to browse in other locations when you're traveling, but you also want to do it to be safe, to be private. And NordVPN is absolutely the best way to do that. It is the VPN of choice. You can use it on your phones, on your tablets, on your computers. One click of an app button on your phone, and boom, you're browsing in another location. You're browsing completely privately. They have threat detection. So if there's malware trying to be installed on your device, threat protection kicks in, deletes it before it makes a mess of your computer. Okay. So I better get the creator code right here. Is it ArsenalVision or is it just Vision? Should have checked that ahead of time, but let's just see. What do you guys think it is? Do you think it's Vision or ArsenalVision? It's not Vision. It's ArsenalVision. Good. There, we figured it out. So
you made you made the mistake that you actually think me and Tim listen to you. I mean,
no. Don't worry. No one else is either. It's all good. Just don't tell the sponsors. NordVPN is world-class protection, privacy, and allows you to browse globally. Look, here's what you're going to get: a risk-free 30-day money-back guarantee. So you can try it. If you don't like it, great. You can pretend it never happened. You're going to go to nordvpn.com/ArsenalVision to get your subscription today. Okay. You're going to get a huge discount on a 2-year plan plus 1 free month. That's nordvpn.com/ArsenalVision. Please, whatever you do that. Now, Clive, is that enough of that?
Indeed.
Nailed it. Okay, that was a little rocky, but we got through it. Thanks, everybody, for bearing with me. Let's talk about the reinforcements. Clive did type in the chat, I need that NordVPN. I'm going to out him on that, so he's definitely listening, and he's definitely a customer. One satisfied customer on the podcast. There you have it. Clive, speaking of satisfied, I will be satisfied when we are back to full strength. Gabriel Jesus on the horizon, but already Emil Smith-Rowe, Reece Nelson back on the bench. I want to talk Smith-Rowe for a minute. I think people have given up on him. And wasn't he our leading scorer last season or something? It's just crazy, how quickly we move on from players. A few good games from Nketiah had people saying, does Jesus walk back in this team? People are ready to move on quickly. We are forgotten quickly. I think Emil Smith-Rowe could still have a huge part to play. So I'm curious, when you think Mikel will find an opportunity to trust Smith-Rowe, because he's going to have to play a little bit, right? He can't just sit on the bench and then come in and be his best. How do you think he'll be integrated? Could it be Europa League? Where's the opportunity for Smith-Rowe to come in and start to make an impact? Because he's a player that I think has the chance to really influence our running.
Yeah, I've long had the thought process that the players that are not playing right now are the players we need to be looking at and focusing on. So we can all name that first 11 that we'd all like to see. The balance is perfect, etc. But it's the ones below, like Eddie, for example, Vieira and Smith-Rowe, that are the crucial ones. They're the ones that get us around things, over the humps. We've added 2 new players in Jorginho and Trossard, and Kivior we haven't seen yet. So, my instant reaction headline last week was it was a good day for the squad, right? So the squad is growing. One thing to bring it back to your original point was around Smith-Rowe. We haven't seen him for a while. Our memories are very, very short. Generally, that's the way we operate as fans. But I'm looking at his physical development because basically that's the only thing that matters for him. We all know he can play football. So physical development versus where he settles in the pitch and positioning is the only questions for that kid. As simple as that, because talent's not an issue. But I don't know if you've noticed when you see him on the bench how much taller he is. And sometimes when you rest, when you don't play, and because these guys are training and playing every single day, it gives you a chance for your body to settle. And I just wonder if some of these issues are based on growing pain type issues. For anybody that's had a young player or academy player as a son or something like that, I'm talking about here, a young athlete, things that happen around shins and knees and things like that. And there are quick growth spurts and how you manage those growth spurts and how you have to rest people. It wouldn't surprise me a lot of his issues are based on extreme growth spurts quite quickly. He looks really quite tall now, quite much bigger, and it makes you wonder about his potential position. He looks bigger than Eddie, and Eddie's playing centre forward for us, so the players that I'm not sure about positioning are the ones that excite me the most. Vieira, again, is another one. What could they end up being for us, because they have the one brain intelligence that we're used to. They're system-wise, they're versatile, they're 2-footed, they're intelligent, they can play off one touch, they can carry, they can create, they can cross, they can create their own shot. I mean, these are exciting players, right? So if you look at the Man City squad right now, it's complete. They have one player to come back in, John Stones. Look at our squad. We've got Jesus, we got Smith-Rowe, we got Trossard. I've only seen him for a short period. Jorginho's had his opening statement game. And we've got this to add to the group. So our true form, our true self is not there yet. And I think this is our big advantage, how we bring these people in and hopefully the value they add between now and the end of the season. And this is the bit that none of us, not even one of Scott's models can incorporate, because it is down to the human side of things and how the manager incorporates his players into the squad, right? So this could be our biggest trick, Elliot, if it all goes well.
Yeah, well said, Clive. Tim, it's got to hurt Smith-Rowe. He's an academy kid, like Nketiah, like Saka, right? These are guys that came from the same place with the same feeling about the club and feeling about the group, and he's seeing them do this special thing. Nketiah getting to have his chance to be a part of it, Saka breaking out as the star of the league, potentially doing it, and he hasn't had the chance to participate at all. That could swallow you up in depression. You can feel lost, your career slipping away, or it could motivate you. I am chomping at the bit because when I get my chance, I'm never giving it back. I want to be a part of this. That hunger could drive you. I feel for him. I want him to have his part in this. Do you think there's still time for him to play a big role this season? I mean, there's clearly still time. Do you think that Mikel will find the trust in him and find the ways in him to get him involved? I do think Europa League could be an absolute blessing for him, because if he starts those games and plays and stays fit and does well, he will make himself a factor in the league, in the league group. So is that how you see his path to getting involved here?
Definitely. I think this is a very, very big couple of months for Smith-Rowe on an existential basis, shall we say. I think I've ticked over into one of those people who's just like, when this guy's fit, it's a bonus. And I'm trying to moderate my level of like emotion around that, because I'm irritated by it, because he's such a good player and I think he's got so much to add. And I think we've clearly just been short in that position for so long. And I'm watching guys like Martinelli like catch a bit of flack when Jesus is out and he's playing every minute of every game, and now like Trossard saving him a bit. But there is a point where you kind of start to cross over into being a little bit unsympathetic, more unsympathetic than you should be about injuries, and I think I've detected that a little bit in Arteta, where it's a bit like, come on, man, you've got to get on the pitch at some point, because we need you, and you're no good to us in a tracksuit. The other thing about Smith Rowe, if I were him, that I'd be looking at, and I'm sure he is that Arsenal spent on Trossard and they spent big money on Fabio Vieira. And if I'm Smith Rowe, I'm looking at that and I'm like, those are both, yeah, exactly. I wouldn't be looking at that and going, oh, well, it's over for me. But, I'd be looking at that and thinking, Arsenal could forget about me quite quickly. Like they could, like the apparatus are there for them to move on. And there is a big part of me that is wondering what his role is now, because he was the Trossard, right? But we bought Trossard. What did we buy Trossard to do? So what's Smith Rowe going to do now? Is he going to be like the backup in that left 8 position? We haven't really seen that. Is he going to be back up on the right? Well, Saka plays every game when he's fit anyway, and we haven't really seen that either. So basically, all of the roles left are kind of unevidenced for Smith Rowe. And if I were him, I'd be chomping at the bit, because I'd be very much on the don't forget about me, because I think you can be forgotten about as a player, and I think he's sailing close to that, I have to say.
Yeah, well said. I think the reality, though, is that he can still be very important for us. Like I don't think we're so awash in attacking talent and creative talent that he has no role to play. And you're right. I mean, his path to a long-term future at Arsenal looks a lot more blocked at the moment than it did at the start of the season. We've had a look at Vieira. We know left 8 is a position Mikel sees him as playing. We've had a look at Trossard. He looks pretty handy, and he's not young in the way Smith Rowe is young, but he's not old. He's not going anywhere anytime soon. On the right-hand side, it's a little more barren, I would say. And maybe there's a case of he adapts his game to be more right-sided as a player. We haven't seen that. I don't know if that's something that's in his locker or not, but I think he's a player who can still have an impact. And I hope that he gets his chance. Well, let me just ask you this, Clive. Do you think this puts us in more of a position to potentially challenge the Europa League as a serious competition that we could win? Because if Gabriel Jesus is around the corner from returning, you could start Nketiah, Trossard, Smith Rowe, Vieira. If Partey's fit, you could start Jorginho. It starts to look like a pretty strong team. So how do you think about that competition? And as a way to keep some of the players who aren't playing a ton, like a Vieira, like a Smith Rowe now, maybe an Nketiah when Jesus is back, a Jorginho to some extent, keep them really sharp and, maybe go assault that competition as one that we could win instead of one we're just chucking away because we're in a title race.
Yeah, I wouldn't chuck away his competition. My views on it. I think Arsenal's record in Europe is very, very poor for a club of our size and stature, right? So if there's opportunity there, we should go for it. Obviously, there's opportunity in the league which supersedes that opportunity, but we have the squad depth to do something, and it's not about just picking a new complete team. It's like maybe allowing Gabriel Magalhaes to come off the pitch at halftime. Do you know what I mean? Or maybe not travel one Thursday if it's far away. So we mitigate risk in the squad, right? We allow ourselves to make choices if someone's having a rough time. Saliba had a rough first game back from the World Cup and he was allowed to sit. And Rob Holding came in for one game. I think it might be an FA Cup game. When Saliba came back, he's improved thereafter. We can manage flat spots in form. Martinelli's had to play for a flat spot in form. and he's finding a new role off the bench. But really, he's just tired. That's all it is. And he's just not quite as sparky. Normally, we rest those players, but we can't because we lack a bit of depth because of what we spoke about earlier, Smith Rowe and Gabriel Jesus. So we have got ourselves into a better position. Still work to do. Still balance to rediscover, which I'm sure you may come on to one of your next topics. Defensively, balance to rediscover, and still players to learn about where they are positioning, what's their best position, etc. So this for me is the fun, mate. The fun is working your way through this. The bad stuff is when we have no options and we're watching players get injured before critical games in Newcastle and Spurs, and we know people are wearing big load of strapping on their legs when we're trying to get into the top four. That's not a fun conversation to have on the podcast, Elliot. Do you know what I mean? And so far, so good. We're in a much better place we were last season.
Yeah, I totally agree. Quickly, just on the Europa League, Tim, do you see that now as as something we can go after? Just to think about this for a second. You could start Turner, Tomiyasu, Holding, Kivior, Tierney, Jorginho, Smith Rowe, Vieira, Nketiah, Trossard. I'm missing one, so I need
Reece Nelson.
Reece Nelson. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
And I mean, we know he won't do that. We know he won't go full. But that's an 11 that might be better than some of the last couple of seasons starting first choice 11s.
Yeah.
So it's not a competition we have to throw away, but would you throw it away anyway? Yeah, I mean, throw it away obviously in quotes because you're never going to just play, the kid, the academy. But how would you approach it?
Yeah, no, I wouldn't for those reasons, and I think some of those games would be useful. I also think it's not just a case of like it being a fitness exercise; it's a trophy worth going for as well, and I think it's a trophy we could win. Obviously, I want to win the league much more, but that doesn't necessarily mean we have to absolutely throw away everything else. But pre-January transfer window, I probably would have been in that. Let's just try and get out of this as skillful as possible. But no, I don't feel like that anymore. I think at the very least you take it one round at a time. Like there's no need to throw away the round of 16, I don't think, for example. And yeah, and ultimately if we go where we want to go and we're in the Champions League next season, we're going to have to get used to playing every 3 games with a bit of light rotation. I think that'd be good for Arteta as well, actually, to learn or be comfortable with that. I'm making 2 changes to the team every game kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, Tim, I'll stay with you just for a second then. The other big thing that's coming is the return of Gabriel Jesus. It's kind of flipped, I think. At one point we were saying, do we even need him back? Now I think we've turned him into, Messi riding on Haaland's shoulders. You look at some of the videos making their way around Twitter, and the comps are getting increasingly dramatic in tone and music choices.
I've shared a few of those myself, I will say.
I have as well. I'm excited for him to come back, Tim. I think we have to be somewhat realistic. Obviously, the worry with things like this is you come back and you do your hamstring. You come back and you do your calf. So, we got to be careful and not rush him back. But when do you think we see him? And how do you think Mikel tries to integrate him responsibly and what that's going to wind up looking like for us?
Yeah, it's interesting because I saw some suggestion that the Bournemouth game might be earmarked, but I'm not really sure where that came from.
My wish casting, since I'll be there.
yeah, like that's what I was thinking. Like where exactly I was looking at like Ornstein's Twitter feed and all of that. I was like, I can't really see this anywhere. So I mean, I don't really, I don't imagine it's too far. I've always kind of thought March. That always seemed to be in line as much as Arsenal have been a bit circumspect about it, in line with what people have said. And also, I think I read someone tweeted Xhaka got this injury last season and he was out for like 78 days or something, and Jesus has been out for 70 or something, so it must be coming, type thing. I think we desperately need it. I really do. I think we miss him so much for so many obvious reasons. I also think like Nketiah has played every minute of every game in that time, which he's not used to doing anyway. And he must be one of the only players that's done that anyway. I can't think of many other players, like maybe Gabriel. Saka must be close, but like he's played a lot of minutes, and I just kind of think this happens as well. Like ideally, like I think Nketiah is a good backup. I think he's played well. I think we have started to miss some of the things that he can't do that Jesus does. Not least because Nketiah's had a bit of a rough patch in terms of finishing. I think I saw something like he's created about 3.4 XG or something since his last goal without scoring. And you know, some of that I think will be down to fatigue as well. So this will have been a really useful period for Nketiah to learn, like, you're playing twice a week, and we need 7, 8 out of 10 from you every time. We've never had to ask him to do that before, but I think even just from the point of him catching a bit of a break, because the way it will be handled clearly, and I think we can see that we can trust Nketiah to do this, that we can make it a bit of a gradual handover, maybe a 70-20, 60-30 in either direction for a few games. And that's what Nketiah has done in this period. It's not like, oh my God, we must have, like, even 50% Gabriel Jesus must go straight back in immediately. But I think we've just hit that wall, I think, where you get to a stage where you're back up. You probably don't want them in much more than like 5 or 6 games, and it's beginning to stretch and it's beginning to fray at the edges a bit. And I think Jesus, not least because of the type of player he is, I mean, if you don't feel rejuvenated by it, the thought of it, the sight of it will rejuvenate you pretty bloody quickly, because he'll be everywhere and it will be really noticeable when you haven't seen it for a few months.
Well said, Tim. Clive, your thoughts on bringing him back in and the impact we're going to get from that without, maybe going to complete hyperbole like I probably have on social media.
Yeah, the tears rolling down my cheeks at the thought of it. I think, joking aside though, you want him for this moment, don't you? You want him for these games. We've never really had this for a while. The guy who's the business, our top paid player, the leader of the front line, to be available for the running. That's just what you want. At all costs, we must have that. Then I start to look back at his touch maps and stuff like that. I think, oh gosh, 60 odd touches. Oh my God, I'm looking at 21 touches, and I'm thinking, imagine what you can do with that. Imagine what you can do with all of that extra involvement.
I've got an image of Clive just holding a picture of the touch map with Take My Breath Away by Berlin playing in the background.
Oh my God, can you imagine the collaboration, the movement, the spinning of shoulders? I mean, oh my God, I can't wait. Get your tickets here. It's going to be great. We've just forgotten a little bit what happens there. But I will say this, I've critiqued Eddie a lot, but I will never. He gave me Spurs away. He gave me Manchester United at home. He didn't quite get us over the line for Newcastle at home, a good save. And he just dropped the ball against City a little bit, but he wasn't the only one. Mate, I take that. We got fortunate with the World Cup injury happening in the World Cup, so we saved about 4 or 5 weeks there. We were unlucky but got lucky, if that makes sense. And so Eddie's he's kept our dreams alive, and with our game in hand, we are still 5 points up, which is where we were after the break. And so, yeah, a bit lumpy, bit scary. Manchester United are too close for my comfort, but he's done his job. And we rewatched we rewatched Villa, didn't we, Elliot, this week? And the second half. And I think that was a heroic performance from Eddie, because he was absolutely done in. And he kept pushing and working and really pushing himself to the absolute maximum. Didn't score, but I've given Jesus some big, big claps when he didn't score. And I could see that Eddie was absolutely carrying cement on his boots, but he kept going. He pressed them for the goal that should have happened from Odegaard. I was really impressed with him. I always judge people in adversity, and I thought he was really, really give everything for that Villa second half in particular.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of players on the pitch who will be very excited to welcome Jesus back in terms of what he does for their game. I think for Saka, it takes some of the pressure off, because he's another guy who can carry the ball past midfielder, drop in deep, beat a man, carry it into the final third, which means Saka can make a forward run. He doesn't have to get the ball at the halfway line and be the way we get the ball into the final third. He doesn't have to take as much of a kicking. We already know what he's going to do for a Martinelli and Trossard in terms of finding that left half space. You can't overstate his importance, and you're not doing a disservice to Eddie Nketiah by praising Jesus and saying how good he is. I think, he just is a special player who had transformed us earlier in the season. I'm very excited to see him come back. The challenge for Mikel is he's going to want to have him back in there too, responsibly returning him to action so that you have him for the duration, for the long run. And I'm sure we'll be very careful and cautious about that. I doubt we'll see him. We won't see him against Leicester away. I do think Bournemouth, there's a chance he's on the bench for that. I think that's a possibility. And I imagine just what that would do for the Emirates crowd, just in terms of even seeing him in the lineup at all, even making the squad at all. So we'll see what happens. Let's leave it there. Pretty quiet week. Leicester away at the weekend, a game I'm very excited for. Their defense is absolute trash. And so, it could be a high scoring game. It could be a game of back and forth, but I think there will be goals scored. They're not quite as trash defensively as Liverpool, but that's a podcast of another color. So let's leave it there. Covered a lot of ground. Maybe we'll get a Leicester preview in for patrons tomorrow if you want to join us over there. So keep an eye open for that. Tim's on Twitter @Stillmanator. Thank you, Tim.
My pleasure as always.
Clive's on Twitter @ClivePFC. Thanks, Clive.
Thank you very much.
My name is Elliot Smith. You can block me on Twitter. And Gunner, we love you. And we'll talk to you after Arsenal 10, Leicester 0.